Welcome to the Future of Coding Virtual Symposium #1. Today, I'm going to give a brief overview of our purpose, which will be covered by Steve, and then we will cover the format and how we intend to stick to the format. So I'll hand it off to Steve.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for waking up or scheduling this at whatever odd hour this is for you in the world. So this is a really fun experiment in synchronicity, video, and quick updates. Thanks, Breck and Cindy, for coming up with this idea. And special thanks to Breck for making this happen on the Slack. And thanks, Cindy, for moderating. So the intention for the symposium is to spark interest in each other's work, potentially leading to conversations and then friendships, collaborations, and maybe even teaming up one day down the line. So I have a couple pieces of advice for the presenters and for the listeners, and I guess every presenter will be a listener most of the time. So for the presenters, I encourage you to share the vision that you're chasing, even if you're not totally sure how you're going to get there or if it's possible, because I think there's nothing more enticing to fellow researchers than a compelling vision with challenging questions. And I would remind those listening that all big new ideas are in the beginning so rough around the edges that it's almost impossible to see the beautiful insight at their core. And also that beautiful core of any new idea is incredibly delicate. So even in your own head, while you're listening, be kind in your thoughts and open-minded. I challenge you to find something you can learn from every single presenter, because I promise you that you can if you listen closely enough. And with that, Cindy will be moderating, so I will let her explain how this will go.
All right. Thank you, Steve, for explaining the purpose of the symposium. For the format, we're going to have 10 speakers. Each speaker will have 2 minutes each and a 1-minute Q&A. The way that we're going to stick to the format is at 10 seconds, I will give the speaker a warning. At the 2-minute mark, I will mute the speaker, and then we'll do the 1-minute Q&A. And then I'll cue the next speaker. At the end, we'll do some closing remarks, and then everyone can either hang out in Zoom or go into Slack and continue the discussion. And with that, I will introduce the first speaker, who is Doug.
Thank you.
Can we do a mic check?
Okay, Curve is a language for making procedural generated art. The original focus was 3D modeling and 3D printing, but it's evolving to support all kinds of full-color, animated, interactive 2D and 3D graphics. Curve is not limited to CAD-style designs. For its curved, organic-looking shapes, 3D fractals, randomized patterns based on fractal noise. Shapes are represented as mathematical functions. They can be infinitely detailed, infinitely large. Curve shapes and fractals can be represented exactly. Curve is an end-user language for programmers and artists. It's a live coding environment. Curve is dynamic and tight because when you're live coding, the code must continue to run even if it contains type errors. The API made for making geometric shapes, which is on the screen right now, is based on CSG, constructive solid geometry. There's a basic set of geometric primitives, and there's a rich set of operations that transform shapes into new shapes. This is a declarative API, and Curve is a pure functional programming language. Curve is easy to use for beginners and powerful enough for advanced users. This is accomplished by a progressive API with different levels of difficulty and power. The CSG API is easy to use. That's on the screen now. All of the CSG primitives are implemented in Curve using the abstraction of signed distance fields, and that API is for experts, and that's on the screen now. Curve programs are compiled into GPU fragment shaders for rendering on the display. This happens in two stages. First, the dynamically typed curve program is interpreted, yielding a shape value. Then, the function values within
All right, thank you, Doug. Did you stop talking or did you get muted? I didn't mute you. Doug, you there?
The video looks like it froze for me.
Oh.
For Doug, everyone else is still live.
For Doug, everyone is, I see. All right, well, we're going to jump to Q&A. Doug, if you can hear me, do you want to refresh your Zoom? Doug? All right. I think what we're going to do is move to the next speaker, and then I will direct message Doug and get his situation. And we'll do a Q&A with Doug after the Q&A of the second speaker. So we're going to move to Steve.
All right. Hello again, everybody. I'm going to use my 2 minutes to give a quick update on how my October went, because it was such a fun month for me, and I think a lot of interesting things happened, but I haven't had an opportunity to share them in any other format yet. So the month began, I took a course on communication that, sorry for the New York's noises. I took a course on communication at the beginning of October, and it totally changed the way I communicate for the better with like so many people in my life. One person that really helped me communicate with is Alan Kay. We emailed multiple times a day for like every day for a couple of weeks. And I learned so many things. And one of the things we talked about is how big impossible projects like inventing the personal computer and the internet, which took 14 years and about $1 trillion. About $1 billion, and it created many trillions of dollars. I learned about how those projects have happened in the past and how they can be replicated. The way I describe this to most people is through the Manhattan Project. Invention can be done mostly on demand with a large amount of resources poured into a well-run team of Einstein-like people. So through this, it's when I posted on the Slack that I'm trying to raise money for our community. It's been a bit harder than expected, than I expected. I think most people would have realized that this was going to be hard. Part of why this has been harder than I expected is that I misunderstood what Alan meant. I thought he meant $20 million total, but he meant $20 million per year. So that's a lot more money than I thought was going to be necessary. But anyways, I spent a lot of time in October talking to all sorts of people, nonprofit, government, and capitalists of all sorts about where I could get this money and how we could structure it in a way that would work well for the capital allocators and also the researchers, because usually you come up with a way that works for one, not the other. So that's all I have time for. More to be shared later.
All right, we'll move to Q&A.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Shubhadeep. I have a question for you. Hi. So the project that you are trying to raise money for is exactly what? That I didn't understand. Sorry.
Yeah, great question. The way Alan Kay has this phrase, the real computer revolution. He talks about how the real computer revolution hasn't happened yet. And so the kind of our community, our like general movement is the project. And I think of it as one revolution or one project in the same way that ARPA was one project. It was like a bunch of researchers pursuing this one vision, which eventually led to the personal computer and the internet. So part of what's so great about how that worked is it was a community project, and this is also a community project. The difference is that community had, tens of millions and eventually hundreds of millions of dollars poured into it, and our community has much less than that. So.
All right, we only have time for one question. We're going to move to, thank you, Steve. We're going to move to Q&A for Doug. Anyone have any questions for Doug? Going once, going.
I have one.
Doug, what's the? Oh.
Oh, sorry. What you mentioned animation and interactivity. Actually, I've seen your project, and I think even built your package on Arch. But how does interaction work now? You have sliders, or did you add more kind of? I haven't seen it in a while. I think you're muted. I see you talking, but I can't hear you.
Sorry, sliders are the only interaction right now. The other stuff is the plant. There's a combination of what's there, what's planned was in my presentation.
Okay.
So I'm intending to add a kind of an Elm-like API for interacting with the mouse and keyboard.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we only have time. I guess we only have time for one question each for the 1 minute. Thank you, Doug. And thank you for the questions. We're gonna move to Breck with Ohio.
Okay, let me unmute. And okay, so can folks see my screen?
Yep.
All right, great. Good morning, everyone. First, I just want to say, Steve, you've got great lighting. I like your setup, whatever you got going on over there in New York. So this is Ohio. My mission with this product is to allow everyone to do data science at the speed of voice. And I'll show in a second what I mean by that. I finally open sourced it 2 weeks ago. It's not so pretty yet, but it is open source now. And I think that'll allow me to improve development speed. I'm hoping that the product will be kind of recommendable in 2020. I wouldn't quite use it yet. It's not really ready, but that's where we stand. And if there's anything you would like to visualize, shoot me an email, breck@treenotation, or hit me up in the Slack. So when I say do data science at the speed of voice, I want to try to really either fail at this task or really try to make it 100x easier to do data science. So for all of these are some demos here running on my machine. Up here is a quote like Amazon amount spent by year, and I wanted to generate a program that will kind of show me my spending. So here's the source code for that program right here on the left. You can do things visually in Ohio, or you can code by hand. That's kind of one thing I'm going for. So say I was curious, oh, how popular is the name Aria? This is the type of chart that it should show. I could say, show me my Hacker News posts compared to the leaders, and I can kind of see that how these folks get higher scores than I do, and maybe I can learn something. At work, I could say, show me the top types of cancer in the US. For Git, I can say, show me my Git commit history and trends, lines of code, etc. So what I just want to make it so easy to do data science that you kind of do data science for things that you wouldn't normally do, because it would be too time consuming to create a Python script or R script to do that type of thing. So yeah, that's what I got so far.
All right, thank you, Breck. We'll move to Q&A for Breck.
So I have 2 questions. Should be pretty quick, especially if the second one is just, no, that's too complicated. How does data get in? Are you just importing CSVs? And could you show us the visual editor?
Sure. Yeah, data gets in. Now we just create a new doc. You can, from kind of anything. So you can either do like write data directly inline like that, or you can kind of connect to any web source or MySQL source. I can connect to Reddit here. And so that'll fetch the top stories from Reddit. And I could say, make a table out of those top stories right here, and maybe make a bar chart or something like that. So hopefully that, of course, it's a little buggy, but hopefully that shows both of those.
No, that's great.
Options.
Just,
all right.
Just one very, very last question, if you don't mind. Do you position this tool as a BI tool or something else?
I don't necessarily position it. It can be used for BI, but I'm more interested in any type of analytics. So I hope people prioritize that, and I would love someone to maybe make a paid product out of this open source code base, but not yet. At the moment, I don't position it BI.
All right, thank you, Breck. The next speaker is Garth with Data as Code.
So I realized that I will probably have time to get to about 10 seconds of data as code. 2 minutes is pretty short. I'm actually going to start a timer. The main thing that I actually want to impress on everyone is the importance of, number one, marketing and user interfaces. If you want to talk to me about data as code, absolutely. But I think that as a community, our biggest stumbling block is going to be adoption and how many eyes we can get on our projects, both in terms of like feedback and in terms of general impact. So when you are thinking about your project, as someone who religiously checks this group because I'm just very thirsty for information at all times, anytime you can give a video tutorial, a GIF overview, or even like a short audio explanation accompanied by a few pictures or a presentation, it makes the project much easier to share. And if in those areas you can focus not on the technical benefits of how your project is implemented to make it particularly efficient, but rather on the items that it can do for the user to make their life better, whether as a coder or as a like general end user, the easier it is to share in a way where I can make somebody else find it interesting. This is just as somebody who's super concerned by the sheer number of people who think that computers are fine, right? Like, I think that's our biggest hurdle here. We all understand that working with computers could be much more empowering, could create a much better world where people are more informed, etc. The main thing that you want to focus on there is the experience of somebody who has no context, no understanding of what you're doing. And the first thing you need to get to for them is, what does this do for me? And if we can accomplish that, I think we'll see a much bigger uptick in terms of knowledge of our projects in general, which can lead to funding, it can lead to support, it can lead to coverage, it can lead to user feedback. That's all the stuff you need, right? More than anything else, more than your theoretical backing, more than an efficient implementation. Like Rails sucked when it came out in terms of efficiency. Brett Victor created this movement with a PowerPoint presentation, and the main thing that came out of that is the GIF of the Mario moving across those things. Please make just one of those for your project, and I think we'll kick ass as a community. Thanks.
Thank you, Garth. Anyone have any questions for Garth?
Yes, I would have one. Just to make sure to understand properly, what you're working on at the moment is to actually help any product or any platform to create content for user onboarding and self-service. Is that right?
I have my own side project in terms of the future of code stuff. I am willing to go the extra mile to help anybody out with their marketing and documentation materials. The problem is that I'm going to be somebody who's going to start out with no information about your project. So that means a minimum of like a Zoom call or a Slack call where we talk about what it actually does, who it helps, stuff like that. I will help you create those animations. I will do whatever it takes. I am so sick of seeing projects that sound really interesting, but I still cannot explain for the life of me to somebody else what it is that it does and why it's interesting. But yeah, I will help any of you with any of that stuff. If any of you are into APL, Forth, the idea of structured code editing or visual programming, talk to me about those. Those are what my actual side projects work on. I think our bigger problem is probably marketing though. It's not my idea.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker is, how do you pronounce your name? Shubhadeep?
Shubhadeep. Okay.
Shubhadeep?
Yeah.
All right.
Hi, I will go. Hi, I'm currently working with Codist AI. I've been a developer for 16 years and I value my time as much as other developers' time. Developers are constantly put away from their IDE to look for information in-house on the web. For an example, code, bug resolution, write arguments to a function, etc., etc. So I'm working on this platform called Codist AI as a CTO. Is about providing developers with the right information at the right time, contextualized knowledge about the code that you are working on at the moment directly in your IDE. This knowledge can be internal or external. Let me actually walk you through a demo quickly. I'm gonna share my screen. Is it my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So, so here, for an example, we have a Jupyter notebook, and this is the Codist AI assistant, and you pop up, it detects very similar, very popular patterns. For an example, you are using NumPy, it says that usually people use NumPy as NP. It detects that you have a DB application from your own code, which is an SQL Alchemy application. It drags up, brings up the SQL Alchemy's basic documentation and shows you, for an example, how to get one query, one object, and so on and so forth. And then, so for an example, these, and then let's say I'm going to go a little bit faster. Then in the next one, you get a PD data frame where it brings up again the data frame's documentation. It brings up some example from it, and even popular usage pattern where which you will probably look for in web and the documentation for a long time. And the third one is pretty interesting. For an example, it detects that there are places where you are trying to do a determinant on a non-square matrix. It tries to warn you that don't do that, it will end up having an error. So basically, this is the kind of, this is a very short video that I shared with you. I will be very happy to have any kind of feedback and any further feedback or collaboration or whatever you may want to have. And that's basically everything from my side. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Shubhadeep. Anyone have questions for Shubhadeep?
I would. Are you targeting the enterprise, like managing like best practices in a large organization?
Well, at this moment, I'm trying to help developers. I'm trying to help developers and data scientists who are actually mainly data scientists, because data scientists are not born developers. They often struggle with code to find the right information. We developers have our way with finding information sometimes, but data scientists are often quite in dark. I know some of my friends are data scientists, but it will still impact companies afterwards when we are big and at the end, if we make it success.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Thank you, Shubhadeep. Our next speaker is Dan with Flowcode.
Yeah. So let me just share this screen. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
we
can see it now. Yep.
Right. So, hi, I'm Dan, founder of Quaya. We're building a general purpose visual coding environment called Flowcode with the purpose of easing close collaboration between technical and non-technical people on software and BI projects, which is why I asked Chaudhry about the enterprise. So since this is a classic nodes and arrows data flow kind of programming environment, which is what many of us are working on here, so I'll just focus on the distinguishing qualities and features here. The first of which is the emphasis on a very strong user experience. Part of it is that it's touch first. So it's not only a departure from text-based coding, but from keyboard-based coding as well. We want to make working with Flowcode as pleasurable as possible. So secondly, the data flow graph is hierarchical in nature. And so we have these solid nodes that are atomic and implemented with actual classic code. And then we have these hollow circles that have their own internal structure, which is our way of helping the user deal with complexity so that we're restricting their focus to a single node and its first degree children. And then finally, I'd like to touch on how flow code supports compiling to multiple languages and deploy to multiple environments. In a single graph, you can build an entire client-server system or a distributed system, and then deploy that to wherever you need to. And there's a lot more to be said about this. This is just really a glimpse of it. So I'm looking forward to questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. You stayed right on time. It's like you rehearsed. Anyone have questions for Dan?
I have a question.
Garth, yeah.
I just didn't want to step on anyone. So these are primarily UI questions. Do you have anything in the roadmap for using other visual icons than spheres to indicate perhaps like whether something's a map versus a filter?
Yeah, so, yeah, sorry.
The second part is just like, are there any places where the interactions bottom out at a visual, like a hollow level, or do they all bottom out in code? And do you have any plans on those? Does that make sense?
Okay, first part, we do have plans to introduce different colors and different shapes to distinguish between, or icons to distinguish between different functionalities of components. But obviously, this is, I forgot to mention that this is a very early stage. I've been working on this for 4 months, and this is the first time that it's kind of demoable in a working environment. Regarding the, I'm sorry, could you repeat the second part of the question?
Are there any aspects of the editor either planned or implemented where the first interaction is visual rather than code?
I remember. So yeah, beyond the code, so there are these, there were these what I call feature nodes that displayed the bar chart view and the table view and so on. So you would be able to add stuff in there that you can interact with, say like defining a formula as a mathematical formula. So like more of the kind of natural ways of dealing with things that we see in the Slack channel sometimes. Yeah, there's a very long backlog.
Yeah, I'm sure. Great, thanks.
All right, thank you, Dan. Our next speaker is Adriaan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
And you can also see my screen?
Yes.
All right, so okay, so I'm trying to simplify programming by programming in terms of what programs are instead of what they do. And I'm hoping that this will make things like visual programming much simpler. So one kind of programming paradigm, which is popular and very general, like you can make any program in it right now, except what we'll see later, is called functional reactive programming. And there, a program is a value which changes over time. So in maths, it's kind of like a function from time to some value. So for example, an animation is like this. So you might have this kind of Y position of the circle changing over time. You might have the color of the circle changing over time. And if you put them together using like some kind of formula that says, put the circle at the Y position with the color, then you get this little animation, which, yeah. So then my question now is, what is a distributed program? Because usually that's always done in terms of sending messages between processes and things like that. And I'm modeling this as a distributed program is something which, like a value which changes not just over time, but also over space. So in kind of distributed functional reactive programming, a program is a value which changes over time and space. So it's a function from space, time to some value. And then we want to model communication, and usually that's done by sending messages. So that's what programs do, but we want to know what a distributed program is. And so that's kind of what communication is. And I'm modeling that as perception. So we can just like perceive some program, and as time progresses, we know more about the program. Okay, that's my 2 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Adriaan.
Questions?
Yes, I would have one question. What can be the application of such a new approach?
Okay, so what I'd like, so there are these visual editors which you can like make programs by drawing boxes and lines between them and stuff like that. But these never do distributed programs, for example. So this would be like kind of a model to put distributed programs inside of this kind of more visual, easy to understand programming environments.
So just to be a little bit more clear, are you trying to extend the computing, this particular computing model to include distributed or computing in this?
Yes. So basically, the more things you can model many things, but like I'm doing distributed programming, but you could also try to model file systems and things like this. And whenever you model something, it will make it more accessible. It's just this kind of shift to think in terms of what is instead of what programs do.
All right. Thank you, Adriaan. Our next speaker is Ellen with Dark.
Hey everyone, I am the co-founder of Dark, and our mission with Dark has been to make it so everyone is able to write software. The distinction there compared to how some other people approach the problem is we think that everyone is able to build software when software becomes an order of magnitude easier to make. And the philosophical background we go back to is the 1986 paper from Fred Brooks called No Silver Bullet, where he said that you can only make software an order of magnitude better if 90% of the things you're doing aren't necessary or are accidental complexity related to getting something to work with computers rather than the software business value you're trying to deliver. And so with Dark, we've been taking an approach where we want to remove all accidental complexity from coding. And so what we've done to do that is we have combined a programming language editor and infrastructure, and you get a bunch of really interesting benefits as a result. So first one is you have literally 0 environment setup time. I opened this right now. The next one is we've distilled the infrastructural components. So you have API endpoints, background workers, cron, and internal tools. And so making an API endpoint goes from being something complicated to being something that just exists on the internet. And the other piece of this is I didn't have to worry about deployment at all. So deployment is completely removed in addition to infrastructure. It just happens as I do things. So if I want to change this now and then I go back and refresh, I now have an updated version of it. And I'm able to see real tracing data coming from my application to debug. So if I curl to my application, I will get a 404. And I have somehow messed up my demo. I don't know. So I guess I can do 404 a different way. So let's just do this. And then when I get a 404, I'm able to see that and then debug using that information and the live trace that came in. If I had a query parameter, I will also get that.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you, Ellen. Questions?
Which language did you use to write Darklang? What is the framework behind? What is?
It is written in OCaml.
Can I get a beta invite?
Yes.
Thanks, Ellen.
Me too, please.
Okay, I'm Ellen at darklang.com. If people want to email me, and you get extra beta invites if you want to build Slack bots, because that's what I'm trying to get a bulk of people to do right now.
We could use them in the FOC check. That sounds
Oh,
great.
yeah, if you want to build Slack bots for the FOC chat, yes, you can have an invite immediately.
All right, thank you, Ellen. Our next speaker is Sol.
Hey, let me set up my screen real quick. You all see that?
Yes.
Yeah, Okay, so this is a little experiment about end user live coding. There's a little asterisk there because this is not for any everyday user. I'm focusing specifically on people that are experts in CAD applications with this little experiment. And it's all about having live coding, so real-time scripting where the code runs every frame all the time while you're editing it, and combining that with direct manipulation using ideas from immediate mode UIs. And the hope is that people can build, modify, and use tools in kind of a combined workflow where the context switches are not very apparent and so fast to make that it becomes natural to do them. So here's a very little demo. So there's like 9 objects here, and there's a little script on the right that defines this interaction of selecting objects, which is kind of a built-in library function, and selecting a line, which is also built in, and then moving those objects to a point. And you can see as objects are selected, it previews where they will move to. You can still adjust everything until you're happy with that, and then you hit the key to commit that kind of transaction. So from immediate mode UIs is taking that inspiration of running the code every frame, so you always have feedback. Errors will always immediately be shown. And the state that is required to track from frame to frame is kind of hidden from the programmer in a way. And those functions can stack up very, very neatly on top of drawing and hit detection stuff. I'm going to skip over that because of time. And the other kind of more or less unique thing about this interaction flow is that all state of the main application is separately stored and only changed on user interaction. So while you write, you don't have to fear that you lose progress based on a bug or something like that. And just when you're happy, you hit the key and you commit to changes. So compared to regular scripting interfaces like they exist in Electronics CAD, for example, in KiCad and Python, the development workflow of a plugin is a much tighter loop. You can just work while you're there. You see the preview of the operation and of what you're doing. And that same constant feedback applies when you're manipulating the document as well using those tools. And you don't have to fear losing state while you're working on a tool or while you're making selections, because that's just a thing that's part of the experience. And the hope is that you can build up like a library of tools, share them with coworkers, maybe in your their or your organization or whatever, and things like that. Yeah. Just, I don't know if I have any time left. Oh yeah.
No time left.
Good. There's just another GIF of like placing things in a star shape with a slider. That's it. Thank
Cool.
you.
Thank you, Sol. Questions?
Stop sharing.
I feel like I'm asking all the questions, but I think I remember seeing this in the chat, and you're doing this bidirectional. When you commit an input on the visual side, you're adding code on the code side. Is that right?
No, that's not true. You are just changing the, so this is the immediate mode UI influence. I don't know if you know any of this kind of software. I know it only for building literal user UIs with sliders and stuff. So these functions, when you run that point, the thing that draws a rectangle that you can drag around, that thing, every frame, it draws a rectangle, it checks whether your mouse is over that and pressed, and if it's pressed, then it moves its own state to be somewhere else, and in the next frame, it draws itself there.
Yeah, no, I mean that, but you're still, in the end, committing some state somewhere, right? Like you're saving
sure.
the image.
What I meant is that the code is not changed, or like it seemed like you were saying that.
So the code is just for how you do the UI, how you like display. Oh, right, because it's a scripting language for CAD. So all the data is stored in the CAD program is the idea here, and then that's okay. Great, thanks.
Awesome, thank you, Sol.
Thank you.
Our next and last speaker is Martin with NextJournal. NextJournal is one of my favorite tools on the internet right now.
Oh, thanks so much. So yeah, I'm gonna run you through a quick demo of some of NextJournal's features. So on the big idea is like to have a better way for researchers to present their work. This is kind of what Brad Victor is hinting at, with like allowing researchers to argue from evidence. And towards this end, we're building a notebook platform for literate programming that runs existing code. So the goal is not a new language, but take as much code as possible that exists and make it runnable on the platform. And we have a focus on reproducibility. So code that runs today should also run tomorrow. And so we have these kind of standard notebook features, like a Julia cell generating some random numbers here. There's also R cells, and we have built-in support for all kinds of data visualization. And we also, like you see, this is polyglot, and we allow different runtimes to exchange data via this special results folder. So when you write something to results, another cell can go and access this. You can see this bash cell can access this. And the way this works, like we automatically content address any result. You see this is being hashed here, and all data is automatically versioned. And this way it's also reproducible. And yeah, some future stuff that we're working on, we're also adding support for runtimes that run in the browser. So what you see here is a Clojure script cell. The whole project is built in Clojure and Clojure script. So here in the cell, I'm defining an atom that can hold some state, and here a viewer. And as I'm running this cell here, yeah, there are small turtles being added. And yeah, this kind of stuff also allows you to extend the notebook with functionality that isn't in it. So if I run this, the output is cleared. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Martin. Questions?
I'm curious how you do reproducibility with you had a cell generated a random number, I guess determinism in the order in which cells evaluate and randomness.
All right. So at this point, we're not our cells aren't pure, but we try to make things reproducible by versioning everything immutably. So for example, you see this is using a Python environment, and this is also a notebook that's produced, and this starts with a showcase here. And then down at the bottom, you see how this is actually built, installing Conda and stuff. And then this is shared as a Docker image. And yeah, I've also shown in the other example, all data is versioned. Yeah, so we're less interested at this point in this reproducibility in the small, but more, yeah, in the large, applying it to data and individual cells and the environment.
Cool.
So that guarantees that you're always running the same Python version on the code in a journal? Is that an example of?
Yes, same Python version, same libraries, yeah.
Is it live? Is there a way that I can play around with it?
Yes, you can sign up at nextjournal.com.
Okay.
Yeah, reach out to me if you want to also play with this Clojure script stuff. This isn't built in, or yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right, that wraps up the symposium. We did 10 speakers, 2 minutes each, and yeah, thank you everyone for all the thoughtful presentations, and the audience for your attention and your questions. And thank you everyone for participating in this experiment. Breck and Steve, do you have any other closing remarks?
Thank you, Cindy, for doing an awesome job.
Yes.
Can't believe we did that in 40 minutes.
Yeah, stayed on time.
Martin, could you unshare your screen? I can't see anybody anymore.
Is it gone?
I think it's gone.
I think I may have cut out there for a second. I was just saying that I was really impressed by how Cindy was so polite and kept everybody on time.
All right, cool. I think that ends it. If you want to hang out in the Zoom room, everyone, you can stay in here. If you want to, I encourage everyone to communicate with each other about the projects that you're interested in on Slack or email. And we will probably do one of these again if there's interest from the community. So let us know if me or Breck or Steve know if you have feedback on how we can improve it. All right, thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day or evening.